you, so apologies if the language barrier comes in. So I'm going to talk about the Key Stage 3 journey in my school and why it matters. And that for me has a two-pronged approach there. So first of all, why Key Stage 3 has more importance for us now than ever. And then I also want to talk about the actual Key Stage 3 journey itself. So we've put a lot of focus on Key Stage 3 this year to kind of create a more engaging and relevant curriculum that kind of speaks to the geography that we really want to impart upon our students. And I'm really proud of the fact that it's not exam centric. It's not focused on numbers and seats at the start of year 10. We think that the curriculum itself actually does that for us. And I think as well, our curriculum really kind of speaks to students who will not take geography at the end of Key Stage 3 as well, who will go on to do other subjects at GCSE. And I think the curriculum needs to kind of reflect that as well, because when will they actually encounter geography the way that we want them to think about the world at the end of Key Stage 3 if they're not continuing on with us? They kind of lose out in those opportunities for the geographical lens, the geographical glasses to come on. So I think the curriculum needs to really reflect them as well. And I think the curriculum that we do matches our passions as a team and brings out the strengths of our teams, and then that reflects to our students as well. So that's why we have such a powerful uptake at Key Stage 4 then. So before this idea of a journey rose to prominence on Twitter this year, thanks to Josie Luff, I think. We've always talked about a 7-year journey in our school and what we expect students to kind of achieve during their time with us, how they would foster themselves as humans, not just as from the academia approach, but how they would actually develop themselves. One of the ways that we've kind of developed that is to share our 7-year journey with students, what we fully expect them to achieve by the end of Key Stage 3. And we think of the curriculum as a journey because we're trying to actually guide them the whole way through and expose the geography through. And like I said, I'm really proud of the fact that it isn't exam centric. So for example, the coast topic that we do at Key Stage 3 is not verbatim what we're going to do at Key Stage 4 and then again at Key Stage 5. We don't do that. We prefer to expose students to big concepts in geography at Key Stage 3 so that they actually get the geographical lenses on. And yeah, so we've managed to kind of create a curriculum, I think, that doesn't necessarily repeat itself, and I think that's a really important thing. For the journeys themselves, I've seen these become really prominent on Twitter this year, and there's a sort of leniency that they might be becoming a fad, where people are thinking these are fantastic to display, but who are you displaying them for? And part of me wonders, is this all part of, possibly showing your curriculum intent or how you're trying to implement it? But for us, that's not what we've done. We've tried so hard to make the journey really visible to students. So our students will see something very similar to what you're seeing on the board, on the screen every lesson for us, where we make the journey really visible to them, what the learning is actually going to take place, what the sequence of the lessons is going to be. And that allows them to actually think geographically. So we always signpost exactly where we are each and every lesson to students, so they can see, right, this is what we've done, this is what the challenge of today is, and here's what's coming up. So they can actually start thinking geographically and how they're going to apply that to future. We've also broken our journeys down into very small ones for students to use. So these have worked really well for example, our ecosystems unit. So we've broken down the ecosystems journey into mini journeys. This is just an example of the one that we would use at Key Stage 3, of a small sequence of lessons. But the thing that we've really loved to use this year is we've used those as a reflection point for students. So our marking policy is gone the way of the dodo now. So we actually have students reflect every few lessons based on these kind of questions. So you can see an example there of a student annotating it to show what knowledge has been imparted to them, what they've understood in the journey so far. And we found this really useful for actually showing that the relevance of the subject is there. But we also need to remember that we do exist outside the classroom. our curriculum needs to start signposting what are the 21st century issues in the world, and what they should really start caring about, and what they should and what the students do even care about as well. So our students reflect on this all the time, and we get our students to reflect on these sort of issues by just asking them really simple but powerful questions like, why are we learning this? Or why does this topic matter? So for our students, we constantly have them reflecting on the relevance of the topics that we do. So this is an example of what my year 9s did for me in our remote learning at the end of the Easter term, where we covered an ocean and a plastics unit. So students really showing really powerful examples there of what they can do. And then we also need to remember that idea that we're here to light fires in students, and we're here to ignite passion. We're not just here to teach. We're here to impart such powerful sort of powerful really citizenship and activism in the world as well, and that's what we should be doing. So we get our students involved in things like the Young Geographer of the Year competition from the RGS. We have students doing projects. We're sending their work to Antarctica to be to have pictures taken with the scientists. I genuinely have no idea where my copy of Factfulness is, or the LRC's copy of Factfulness is, for most points during the year, because it is lent out to students to read and to come back and discuss that with me, then have those chats in lessons and out of lessons. So these are all really powerful things that we're doing to engage students outside the curriculum. And one of the other things that I've kind of brought forward this year is what if scenarios. And these have been kind of twofold for me. So I love these because first of all, it makes me think about the on future certainties aspect that we see at A level that we need to study. And I love dripping those kind of concepts down to students. But I also think it's a brilliant response to students who actually bring these what if questions into lessons. And I think we all know exactly what kind of what if questions we hear our students talking about in lessons. They're mad usually, but I love spinning these back on them and getting students to actually go, okay, in the context of geographical knowledge now, can I answer a what if question that won't, you know, be immediately answered by a student by everyone will die. So these are kind of examples that we use with students in lessons, like what if there were no borders in the world between countries? You know, we ask them things like, would this work? What would be different? What might be the change? What would happen in the USA? So these have been really powerful for showing students to actually taking their concerns that they've got, the what ifs that they are, not dismissing them, but actually channeling them in a really powerful way. And we're actually empowering and emboldening them because they're taking these queries that can be often dismissed by us and actually getting them to think about these in proper geographical context and actually using knowledge to back that up, and powerful knowledge in that. And then the last thing I would just want to share with you, because I know I'm at my time now, is we have upped the game for retrieval practice this year. So it's not just about quizzes and recaps for us, but we're actually getting students to use critical thinking in lessons and start speaking like a geographer. And my example there on the right-hand side has been a really kind of a powerful example of students this year, where we get them to reflect on where's the geography in these things that we're doing. So I think that's a really powerful question that we need to keep asking students, is what is the geography here? And I think that leans really heavily into what Mark was just speaking about as well, that some subjects are shoehorned into the curriculum superciliously just to engage certain groups of people. But these kind of things are actually really powerful for getting students to go, hang on, where's the geography here? What processes do I see here? What keywords and processes do I associate with these? And I think that's really powerful for students to really develop themselves as a geographer. So that's just a few examples of what we've done as a team. I'm really proud of the fact that we put Key Stage 3 really centric this year in our team, and I'm really glad that it's actually one of the most powerful aspects of our geography team now. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. Before we have questions, let's move on to our next speaker, who is Josh. And then we get back to questions for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you hear me? Is that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm going to talk about something well, very, very similar to what I spoke about at the RGS Teach Meet, which took place a couple of weeks ago. A bit of background context to start off with for anyone that didn't see that. I'm currently completing my master's, and I'm looking into how we can better connect both primary and secondary geography. So I know it's quite a common issue that students arrive in year 7 and are at very different points in terms of the quality of education that they've had at primary school. And therefore you have the issue of trying to balance various different levels of knowledge in each classroom. I know that some schools start with baseline tests and so forth, but essentially what I want to do is I want to take a step back and look at primary school and primary educators and primary teachers and think about what it is that they understand with regards to geography, why they think it's important, and what current barriers there are. So the research essentially started around the idea of powerful knowledge, and I know that Mark spoke about this earlier on this morning. Previous work has been done, but all previous work was centred on primary trainee teachers. There hasn't really been any work so far that's focused on primary school teachers that are qualified and what they believe geography is and how they deliver geography in the classroom. All of the previous research has been based around an open-ended question, which is what is geography? And participants had to define geography in 30 words. And that's something that I've replicated, but this time with qualified teachers. But I've taken this a step further, as I said, and I've spoken to primary teachers and asked them about the current barriers that exist within schools and why they believe that geography is an important subject to deliver at Key Stage 2. Now, I've spoken quite a bit at the RGS about the first 2 questions, which was what is geography and why is it important? But what I want to speak about this morning is the barriers that exist to delivering quality geography at primary schools and what I've decided to try and do to improve the quality and support those primary teachers to deliver more purposeful and more quality geography education. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just present a little bit of the data and a bit of the findings. Again, this is a bit of a repeat from the previous talk, but for anybody that hasn't seen that, I know there's probably a lot of us in here that haven't, I'll quickly guide you through. This is a simple word cloud, and this word cloud essentially outlines the key responses and the most common responses to the question that you can see at the top. What barriers exist to delivering a purposeful geography curriculum in primary school, in their primary school? And as you can see, the most common response and the standout response was a lack of subject knowledge, poor resources, a lack of expert CPD. There is reference to teaching time, which I guess was to be expected as a result of the predominance and the importance that's placed on English and maths at primary school. But what really came out was that teachers either just didn't feel confident or didn't feel they had the subject knowledge, the resources and the time to really deliver quality primary education. These were just 6 of the responses that I've chosen from my research, and I've highlighted in red some of the quite shocking responses, I guess, that kind of show you the importance of the importance of this issue. Responses such as the curriculum's a bit boring, teachers using outdated case studies, limited viewpoints, verging on cultural appropriation, the national curriculum being too prescriptive, not having anyone to verify the suitability of what they're delivering. The subject knowledge needs to be deeper, and subjects knowledge and passion for teachers also needs to be invigorated in some way, and lots of teachers unfortunately did make reference to history or PE taking predominance over geography, and geography kind of being a subject that's left behind. So what I've decided to do based on these responses is develop a website. Now I'm launching this morning. I haven't told anybody about this as of yet. I've been working on this in the background. The website is called Prime Geography. It's live now at www.primegeography.co.uk. We have a Twitter account at Prime Geography, and what I really want to try and do is I would love secondary school geography teachers, specialists, you guys that are all here this morning listening to these talks, to come together to try and better support primary teachers with the delivery of geography. I'm going to quickly, and I'm pushing for time, but I'm very quickly just going to stop sharing my screen and try and flick onto the website just to very, very quickly show you what it looks like. This is the website. I hope you can all see it. If you go onto www.primegeography.co.uk, what I would absolutely love for you all to do is share your email with me, get in touch with me. If you scroll down to the bottom, there are a variety of different options where you can share your email, but in the bottom right-hand corner, if you click Let's Chat Primary Geography, get in touch with me and let me know that you're interested in supporting. I don't really have a specific vision as to where this is going to go. I would absolutely love for this to remain a free platform for primary teachers to be able to access. Ideally, I would love primary resources to be available, but I'd also love for there to be some kind of primary focus CPD, whether they are teach meets similar to this morning, whether they are YouTube videos that are shared, where secondary teachers that are experts are delivering their knowledge and passing on experiences and best ways and best practices to how to deliver primary geography. I am going to stop now because I know that I'm probably pushing already 5 minutes, which I have to try and stay strict to. But if anybody wants, of course, to have a chat with me about this in any further detail, please do. But what I'd absolutely love for you all to do this morning is get onto the website, share your email with me, either via the chat box, sign up and share your email on any of these boxes and keep in touch with us in terms of emails and newsletters and so forth that we start to put together as this starts to build. And get onto our Twitter page, which is here. Blimey, we only had 3 followers before I started this, we've now got 86. Get onto our Twitter page on Prime Geography. Follow the Twitter page, keep in touch with us, get in touch with us if you want to be a part of it. And I'd absolutely love for this to kind of be a real go-to platform for primary teachers to support them in their delivery of geography. That's it this morning. I'd just like to thank Flavia for allowing me to have the 5 minutes to talk about this. I know it's very, very short, but please do get in touch and I'm happy to speak to as many of you as possible about this idea.
Thank you, Josh. That was very good and very professional looking website. I'm quite impressed. We'll keep the questions for later. So Penelope, it's on you now, please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. We're going to talk this morning about autism and the way that autistic students can be better served by our geography classroom. So obviously, autism is a very wide spectrum, and this is in no way meant to take away from our individual relationships with students. We know that the autistic spectrum is very broad, and there are students that come under all sorts of categories. So if you have any general questions about autism, I would suggest you go to the Autism Society website. Its link is on there. So we're looking specifically at what things in geography can cause barriers to learning for our ASD students. So I've identified 3 major areas that cause problems for autistic students in our classroom that are specific to geography. The first one is misunderstanding of examination questions. Now, autistic students have a very literal understanding of language. They also have difficulties with theory of mind. And particularly in human geography, the way geography questions are phrased, this can quite often pose them barriers. I'll give you some examples in a minute to illustrate what I mean. So the second area is stress. Now, all autistic students will find school in general quite stressful anyway. So their window of tolerance is always going to be much smaller than other students. And anything that pushes them into their high levels of stress is going to completely impede their ability to learn. So we want to try and make sure that we don't push those stress levels up. Some of the ways we can do that completely unintentionally is by obviously creating noisy classrooms, creating unexpected changes in our lessons, group work activities. All of these things can generate stress for our autistic students. Now, we're not saying for a second that you shouldn't do those things, but we do need to be thinking about, will that individual be caused stress, and if so, how can I manage that better? The third area is difficulties of imagination. Now, by imagination, I'm using that word as a substitute for theory of mind, which obviously is a much more broad thing. If you want to do some research into theory of mind, it would be a good idea for background information. But essentially, autistic students find it incredibly difficult, or perhaps impossible, to put themselves in a third-party situation. And we ask our geography students to do that all of the time. So we ask them to think about countries they've never been to, people they've never met, and we ask them to imagine what life might be for those people in those places. And obviously for autistic students, that is a very, very difficult thing for them to do. So again, we're going to look at some examples of how that can be an issue. So the first one, exam questions. Now these 3 exam questions I've chosen because they have generated genuine problems for autistic students in the classroom. Now for a neurotypical person like you or I, these won't pose a problem. Suggest how the UK is moving towards a post-industrial economy. Now, for an autistic student, the student said to me, but the UK is a country, how can it move? The second one, which of the population pyramids shows a town on the coast? The student said to me, the graph is not a town. How can it be a town? So literal interpretation of language can be a real significant problem. So when we are looking at these questions, we want to be thinking about, is there a way of interpreting this that is likely to cause a trigger? The third question there is another very common one that poses problems for autistic students. Suggest reasons for the land use shown. The first reason that poses a problem is because the word suggest is not a direct command word. So in many other subjects, examination questions are much more direct. Suggest is a very geographical thing. And what it requires for them to do, suggest reasons for the land use in this place that you've never been, with people that you've never met, is a theory of mind question, and an autistic student probably won't be able to access it. So what can we do about it? Be on the lookout for likely pitfalls of language. So look at the questions that you're setting, think about whether or not they're likely to pose challenges. If they are, then we use explicit language to interpret that question for the student. The examiner says, and the examiner means. That way, they are able to then access the question, which is obviously the important part for them. So if you have an autistic student who's looking at a blank piece of paper with a question you've given to them, their chances are that they haven't interpreted it and they're struggling, and that will raise their stress levels and they won't be able to access. Another thing we like to do as geographers is lots of kind of activities, role plays, put yourselves in. Here's a picture of some people thinking about the deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. How might people think about this? Now, obviously, these kind of activities pose significant challenges to autistic students because putting yourself in somebody else's shoes is something they can't do. So if you're going to do one of these activities with an autistic student in the group, there's 3 ways you can make sure that their ability to engage in the learning and access the learning will be much better. Firstly, we give the student pre-warning about the activity, make sure they know in advance, preferably the lesson before at least, we are going to do this, and this is what I would like you to do in this lesson. Being pre-armed is prepared, and they will obviously be in a much better position. Secondly, if you can arrange for that student to have a third-party speech character within the activity that you're doing, an objective speaker, then that's going to be much easier for them to access. So if you have a choice, think about what you can do with that. If not, make your first-party character into a third-party character, and that will help. Thirdly, if you can provide them with facts rather than opinions that they can then work with, that's going to make it much more accessible for the students. And I believe I'm out of time, and that's all I've got time for. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very great. Okay, so we still have time for a few questions, so that's great. Thank you, everybody, for trying to keep to the time. I know it's not a very long time. Question for Paul. Is Paul there? Come back,
I am,
Paul.
yeah, I am.
So 2 people actually asked about your coasts example. They were asking what concepts you use to teach in Key Stage 3 compared to Key Stage 4, because they seem to struggle to make the kids differentiate between them two.
So we merge coast with rivers as a topic. So we kind of do it around the concept of a shaping places concept. And we we largely focus on the idea of erosion and transportation as a process. It might sound a bit silly, but a lot of students in my school and in my experience tend to think of coasts and rivers as being static. So that idea of movement that, you know, a river can eat into a bank and yeah, that bank gets eroded, but that nothing else happens to that material and sediment that's been eroded. So that's a really difficult concept for students to actually get for us, that material can go somewhere else and do something else somewhere else. Yeah. So that's a big concept for us, where we try and bring that concept into our lessons, so we focus on that for our students.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to Josh now, and then if we have time I go back to Paul again. Josh, you there? Yeah. Do you advocate secondary specialists getting together with primary colleagues to share subject knowledge? And should we be setting up hubs with our feeder schools to have this opportunity?
Yeah. So the first part of the question, I guess that's the initial goal of the website, really. I don't for a second think that I can do this on my own. And I guess the vision for the project and the website is to try and collate secondary school teachers together that are happy to try and support, to give free advice, free resources, free bits of CPD, whether that's, as I said, YouTube videos, whether that's blog posts, whether that's smaller teach meets and so forth. So that's the aim. So absolutely, yeah, if any secondary school teachers on here do want to get involved with it, please get in touch with me either via Twitter on my own Twitter page or on the Prime Geography Twitter page or via the website. Anyway, and I will get back to you. My phone is basically exploding at the moment, but I will try and get back to as many people as possible as quickly as I can. The second part in terms of increasing connections within multi-academy trusts and with feeder schools, absolutely. My current school don't do that, but I'm moving school this September. I know that my next school already does this. They are a part of a multi-academy trust with about 10 schools. And within those 10 schools, there's around about 5 or 6 primary schools. And they do a lot of work between secondary and primary to support with the delivery of curriculum and to ensure that students are arriving in year 7 at a relatively similar point in terms of their geography knowledge. So absolutely, yeah, if schools are able to do that, I know time is always an issue, but if schools are able to do that in some way so that they can better support their feeder schools and primary schools within their own academy trust and local area, then absolutely, yes, I do advocate for that.
Yep, sounds good. Penelope, Hannah asked about flipped learning to help AST students. Do you think that, so they know what they're going to study before they go to class, does that help?
In terms of academic content, then that can help.
Yeah.
Particularly, I'm thinking more about the role of the activities themselves. Autistic students mostly don't have any problem with the curriculum itself. The problem they have with accessing it in the classroom. So if you have an activity that you are going to do in the classroom, which is going to deviate from the normal style of lesson, then yes, flipped learning is a really good way of dealing with that, because they can then go away and prepare the material so that when they come into the classroom, they're not feeling that stress level and they'll be able to do whatever activity it is that you have asked for them to do.
Yep, that's good. Still have a few minutes. I'm going to go back to Paul. Ian asked you if leaving climate change unit until year 9 can cause any problems when teaching earlier topics.
Yeah, definitely. But at the same time, it's hard to think of a single lesson where I don't mention climate change to students all the time. It's not, I don't think it's a topic that can be just left exclusively to a particular unit. I think we have an obligation to talk to it with our students all the time. I mean, my year 7s have been begging me to teach it to them since the first lesson in year 7, because that is something that they're very passionate about. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you there. The curriculum is not perfect. It's a really good curriculum. We've done really good things, but yeah, absolutely, we still have a lot to do. Generally, we usually leave year 9 to after Christmas in year 9. Obviously, it hasn't worked out very well this year for us, but it usually comes in the context for us of giving them a taster of what GCSE looks like. So bringing those kind of GCSE concepts. But if you follow Paul Turner on Twitter, he has done a really fantastic unit on climate change that I've essentially taken all his ideas from to put into my climate change unit for next year. So I think what we're going to do with climate change next year in geography is so different to what we've ever done before, because we're going to finally bring in the idea of climate denial, which we've left to the sides. And we're going to actually bring in ideas of like where this fake news is coming from, and then these kind of like big concepts of like the Green New Deal and things like that. So we're going to actually kind of make climate change front and center, hopefully from next year onwards.
Yeah. Josh, sorry, I messed up. I actually asked you your 2 questions.
That's okay.
Already.
That's
so
okay. That's my job done perfect.
So I'm going to go to Penelope again to ask you your last question. Field work. So a lot of people asking about field work. So what are your tips for that?
Well, field work obviously is a very, very stressful time for our autistic students. So the preparation is the number one thing. So you need to be talking to them long before they're ever going to be going on any field work. You need to be explaining to them exactly what that day will entail. Somebody I noticed mentioned social stories in the comments. If you have students that already use social stories, then that's a really, really good way of managing. So if you can provide them with a social story of exactly what the day's outline is going to look like, and then they can obviously prepare themselves for that work. And you can also obviously work with a parent involved with that. For older students, they don't tend to need the social stories, but they will need very particular preparation. So looking at, well, what were they going to have to wear? Where are they going to eat their lunch? These are the kind of things that preoccupy autistic students. They're very, very worried about lots of the things that perhaps wouldn't be of concern to other students. So make sure that you are speaking to that student individually about that. And obviously, if there is a buddy in the group that they can work with, then no matter what your other thoughts are about academic progress, make them as comfortable as they can be by buddying them up with the people that they feel most comfortable with. And if you've done all of that beforehand, they should be able to have no issues. And again, with the techniques that you're going to be using as well, we always do a run through of techniques beforehand, particularly if you're going to be asking them to do maybe a questionnaire, which would, you know, that makes ordinary students stressed. So if you're going to do anything like that, make sure you've done a dry run with them so that they're fully prepared.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everybody. We're out of time. We're going to have to go to the next talk, but thank you, everybody. I'm going to put your contacts here on the chat so everybody can, because there are all the questions for the three of you, so people can do that on Twitter. Thank you very much. Kate.
Hello.
Kate. Hello.